I was early for Thunder interviews Tuesday, and full disclosure, I'm not usually somebody who's early for things. It was the first day of camp, and though I know Mark Daignault a little, I've never covered one of his NBA teams. I don't know if his practices tend to run long or short, how quickly things happen when they end. So I got to the Thunder Ion, the team's practice facility, about 10 minutes before I had to. Actually parked, started walking, doubled back to get my umbrella because I figured I got the time. When I got inside, there was nobody in the media room. All my fellow reporters were already on the court for the end of practice, and I made it out there for interviews, but not by much. So what happened? Why were things so early? Well, Daignault called his team's first practice really, really tight. And there's a reason for that. There are a lot of guys returning to this Thunder team from a season ago. And as Daignault pointed out, OKC tries to run its summer league the same way it runs its team. So even rookies like Cason Wallace and Keontae Johnson know a lot of terminology. Guard Isaiah Joe, in fact, said nobody looked like it was their first NBA training camp. This is a notable thing about this Thunder team. Yes, it's young, but it's built the way a lot of good teams are built, with a talented core returning, some new young pieces, and guys with some experience in the NBA and elsewhere kind of rounding out the margins. It's also coming off a play-in tournament appearance. It has a first-team All-NBA guard, and one of those new rookie additions was the number 2 pick in the 2022 NBA draft. So it stood out on Media Day when the Thunder talked a lot, but didn't say much about what comes next. There were no big playoff predictions, no bold proclamations that they'd make a leap. I wrote this week that it's a team, at least publicly, that's still very focused on process, more so than progress. It's also a team with a preseason game in less than a week against some guy from San Antonio. If he plays, will be kind of a big deal. So I'm checking back in with my Sellout Crowd colleague, Jon Hamm, today to talk about what we learned from Media Day, what we make of the Thunder right now, and what we're looking forward to next week. I'm Brett Dawson, and this is Heard Thunder. Before we get started with Jon Hamm, I want to take a moment to thank the sponsors who support our show: MidFirst Bank, Laser Light Skin Clinic, the National Cowboy and Western Heritage Museum, Fire Lake Casino, and your Oklahoma Ford dealers. Drive into your Best in Oklahoma Ford dealers today for the best deals on Ford's full lineup of trucks and SUVs. Ford is the best in Oklahoma. Ham, welcome back. Good to have you.
I am back. We are back together again like we usually are. You and I are together a lot for these things.
I know. And, I'm always happy to talk to you at a time when everybody in Oklahoma is focused on basketball. There's no distractions on the football side of things. Everybody is just thinking about the Thunder and Thunder Media Day, and they just can't wait for maybe Victor Wembanyama, assuming he plays, like maybe he's coming here Monday, and that's all the city is talking.
Yeah, I mean, Monday is OU versus Texas, and that is the game that people are anticipating, right?
Yeah, correct. That's Monday night on NBA TV, right? OU Texas.
Yes. Yeah, I don't see any flaws in that.
You have an OU Texas prediction? I do not, just to be clear.
I mean, I've had one for a few days. I mean, look, Texas is really good. And I know, like, I'm probably not allowed to say that in this state, and given, where my, allegiances lie towards OU and OSU. But, reality is that Texas is ranked number 2 or number 3 in the country. I forget where, depending on what poll, for good reason. So, OU they have impressed to this point, but you have to consider the level of competition they've got up against, which is a little bit lacking. And so, given all of that, I'm still leaning Texas at this point, but I'm willing to give it a few days just in case, Texas decides not to play its first 2 lines of players in this game or something.
Yeah, it's good that we're talking about this because it's not like Sellout Crowd has anywhere else people can go to get this kind of expert football analysis. It's not like you could just go listen to the Letterman Jacket or the Jenny and Barry Show or anything like that. We're really where you come
or mind
for
games,
expert, football
Dot
breakdown.
Pod in the trenches.
This is really where people come. They're thinking Heard Thundering.
Yes,
is where I want to go to hear Soonering. That's what they're thinking.
Yeah.
So, Ham, how was your media day? How did your media day go?
A lot like you, Brett, it was my first media day in a few years, or at least the Thunder media day. You've, had the opportunity, since I went to 2019, which was the Chris Paul season. But I haven't been to a media day since then. Didn't really have a reason to, but went this year, and obviously it was a different environment being at the convention center. Normally this is held at Paycom Center. But I liked having it at the convention center. I felt like the thing moved really quickly. I mean, they just sort of got guys from place to place, and they knocked out their commitments. A lot of guys were in a very good mood, as they went from place to place to do their thing. And we spent most of our time in the media room, but I feel like we came away with that with. Sure, there was a lot of canned responses, but I think we could sort of take away just sort of the overall mood, sort of the optimism, and I described it as like this team is very centered. That's sort of how I came away thinking. You know what? They're not any one way or another in terms of direction. They're pretty centered.
That's an interesting way of putting it. Phil Jackson would really appreciate that. A centered basketball team, like very zen,
Yeah.
Very in control of their breathing. I think that would be good for a Phil team. And the Thunder they don't feel very zen. Sam Presti's much more practical than that, I think, than he is he's not so far out. But I do think that's a good way of describing a team that Presti would like, that they're sort of down the middle is a thing I think he would enjoy.
Yeah, and that's sort of how I came away with that thinking because, there were a lot of things in terms of, Shea's accomplishments last season, obviously Vasilije Micic's accomplishments overseas, and they were mentioned, but it's like at every opportunity it was sort of, that's a thing that happened, but however, our focus is here in the middle, not on these things out here to the side.
Right. I think your point about efficiency is well taken. Shouts to the Thunder and everybody. I mean, often there were, we talked about this on another podcast this week. There were two guys waiting to come into the media room. And so in the main media room, as soon as somebody stepped out, somebody else was walking right back in. We got in and out of that main media room in 3 hours, which is a real accomplishment. 11 to 2 is pretty great, given how many guys have to cycle through there. That's exactly what they schedule. So they were right exactly on the schedule. I think we walked out of there at 2:01 when Case and Wallace finished. So that was pretty great. Things were quick. Nobody got really mad at any questions. I think I managed to break that streak today. I annoyed Chet Holmgren in the very first practice. So that was fun. We'll talk about that in a minute. But what was if you had a moment in the main media room, a quote? What was the thing that jumped out to you? We'll talk about bigger themes in a minute, but in terms of a moment, what got you?
Weirdly enough, I had one thought, and that was Davis Bertans describing how he got traded, because I'm always fascinated by, people tend to forget these are real human beings with families that, they have to be uprooted. And so I always tend to gravitate towards how does someone get the news that you've got to uproot and go somewhere else for your career? But actually stepping back a little bit, this is something that I didn't write about, and I should have added more to it. Josh Giddey assumed a whole lot of responsibility for Australia's performance in the World Cup. We didn't really talk about it much in the moment. I don't remember seeing a lot of tweets about it, but you could tell that did not sit well with him, and that he expected a lot more. And that's a lot to put on a 20-year-old kid, by the way, but still, that's something that I was thinking back today, man, Josh really kind of felt that. And he expected more of himself. He expected more of his team. And, that's something to kind of, look a little bit deeper at, I think.
Yeah, he talked about the World Cup being the kinds of games that he loves. And we saw that last year. He was so good in that first play-in game and then not so good in the second one in Minneapolis. And so interesting, I think, perspective from him coming off the way the season ended to have his summer go that way. He was very responsible for how far Australia got. And I think also, as he put it, felt pretty responsible for where they didn't get. I thought that's a good point. It's pretty notable and not something we talked about a lot the first day. I'm a media day traditionalist, so I always like I like whatever variation we get, and we get it almost every Thunder Media Day of I don't need the distractions of a big city. So we got that from Vasa Micic,
Yes,
who said he didn't need a lot of things, and was sort of set up for that by his countryman. Alexei Pokushevsky, who was asked if he was showing Micic around, and he said there's not much to show him, which is exactly. It's probably not going on the Convention and Visitors Bureau website or any brochures anytime soon. I something about that. I live in Oklahoma City. I like Oklahoma City, and yet I get an endless kick out of players doing that.
Yeah, I added that to my story today, where I pulled the curtain back a little bit to explain kind of the purpose of media day, how it's more than for the media types. It is to get, like, the team gets media that they use throughout the season. And I mentioned this moment with Poku saying that, and yeah, my first reaction was to get really defensive about it, but then I realized, like, literally, Micic could be my son. I mean, like, I'm 18 years older than him, so, and I'm old, Pokuševski's younger than Micic. So, what interests them and what interests me are totally different ends of the spectrum there. So maybe they have a point. I don't know. I'm perfectly fine. I'm pretty passionate about where we live. But, maybe there's some 20-year-olds that kind of wish there was just a couple more things happening here.
Me too. I chose to live here. I moved back here before I had this job. I wanted to live in Oklahoma City. So I do like it.
Yeah.
It was interesting. You weren't there for this because it was a practice on Tuesday as opposed to media day on Monday. But Mark Daignault was asked a question about maybe the advantages and challenges of having so many international guys. And he talked about how there weren't really a lot of challenges. Those guys mostly are pretty good English speakers, and basketball, as he put it, is kind of a universal language. And so, when they get on the court together at practice, very comfortable. He said the challenges are probably when those guys leave. It's when they walk out of the facility. It's when they leave the game. And culturally, things are very different. Poku talked about his emotional attachment to the food of his native country and how much he missed that, and having his family in town right now to cook for him was making him so happy. And that's an interesting thing, too. You mentioned the trade, the Bertans trade. I once wrote a story with Doug McDermott and Taj Gibson about what it was like when you get traded in season. I learned some things about, the league pays for 41 days in a hotel. And so you're there, and you've got, like Doug McDermott forgot his his AirPods, and somebody sent him a pair, like a local company that made them sent him some, that kind of stuff. So that stuff always fascinates me when you can take the NBA and sort of equate it to someone's job. It's hard to do because it's not like your job. It's different. But yeah. I do always enjoy it. These guys are, in a lot of ways, they're coming back to work. It's like they've been on vacation and now they're coming back to the place where they work. It's like coming home from summer camp or the first day of school, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think I described, media day and the start of training camp as, part high school reunion, part interrogation, very mild, from the media, because I would not want to go to my job on Monday and have to be peppered for, 10 minutes with questions that I had to answer. It is a very unusual environment. But yeah, it's not just like the players are coming back to work, and obviously they've seen each other for a while and they have a rapport with each other, but the media people are coming back and they haven't seen each other in a few months, and you're getting caught up on, how was your summer and how's the family doing, and people you haven't seen in a long time. So it's an excellent get caught up moment, again, for the team itself to kind of reintroduce themselves to everyone, but also for the people that cover the team as well, just to sort of to do fist bumps again.
Yeah, for people who haven't read that, go to Sellout Crowd and read Jon's story. It's really interesting. Kind of, there are a lot of curtains at media day, so you didn't literally lift any, and you didn't lift the one that Barry Trammell steamed for us to have as our backdrop, to get the wrinkles out of our backdrop for video interviews. We are a startup, after all. We don't have somebody here to steam the curtains.
We do not have those resources, and let me say, a couple of times a Sellout Crowd has gotten together for things. One of these was media day, when yes, Barry Trammell was. I have a picture of him steaming the curtain to get the wrinkles out, and during our photo shoot, like the makeup artist dropped all of her brushes on the floor, and while we're all looking, Barry Trammell is over, hunched over on the ground collecting these things for her. Man of the people.
A great American, great Oklahoman, that Barry Trammell.
Yes.
You talked about players not getting grilled. I don't think I grilled Chet Holmgren today, but I don't think he loved one question that I asked him. When we were talking to Mark Daignault, I was curious. I'm a process person. I'm a basic facts kind of person. And I wanted to know, hey, as you start practice, is there anything with Chet, any holding back, anything you have to concern yourself with? And Mark said, no, there's nothing. He's playing. He's cleared to play. They split up into 3 teams today. Chet had no restrictions. And from Chet, what I wanted to know was basically just like, players talk about this all the time, that there's, after you get over the physical part of an injury, there's this mental part you have to get over where you stop thinking, can I cut on this? Can I jump on it? Is backpedaling okay? Is everything okay? And I just asked Chet a question along those lines. Are you past the point where you think about it? He didn't get mad. He didn't snap, but you could tell it was a thing. He said very quickly, I haven't really thought about it since it happened. It's a thing that happened, and I kind of moved on pretty quickly. And I wasn't suggesting that he was haunted by it or anything like that. I genuinely was wondering, and he did answer my follow-up question. He's not concerned about whether he can cut, whether he can stop and go. That kind of stuff doesn't bother him. I will say this. If Chet Holmgren is not thinking about his right foot, he's one of the very few people in the Thunder orbit who isn't, because I get asked about it all the time. I get asked about his durability constantly. It's a question that comes up a lot. But Chet was also, if there was a man of the moment at Media Day, it was Chet. He's the most interesting sort of new thing. I think Mark Daigneault, about 3 or 4 questions in, said every question seems to be about him. And that was true for a stretch of time. Everybody got asked about Chet, and I know because I was often the one asking it. What was your Chet takeaway from Media Day?
One thing that I just thought of as you're telling this story, I believe it was the first preseason game I went to, which was 2015-16 when Kevin Durant came back from the foot injury. And I still remember him being asked in the locker room after the first preseason game, how's the foot, any side effects or whatever? And Kevin just shook his head and said, next question, which are 2 words that we're very familiar with in this state from our pro athletes, by the way.
That was before it was cool.
Exactly. No, I still remember Kevin doing that. And I mean, I'm sure that these guys just want to move past it. But on the other hand, like, we can't help but wonder, okay? Because like you say, the physical pain is probably long gone, right? But how much of that, and we know this from any number of injuries where physically I feel fine, but man, just sometimes I experienced this once. What if it happens again? And, some guys, it takes a little bit longer to get past that. Maybe because Chet has actually been playing, fairly competitive basketball for a while, that he's a lot further along in that. But he was the guy that players were asked about the most when it came in terms of your teammates, Shea and Giddey, and the little time we got with J-Dub and others. It was all about what does Chet bring to the team? How is he going to help you? What have you seen from him? Because I think it's fairly well understood. I mean, this guy has the potential to unlock a lot of things that this team is going to do now, and is a pretty good dial for where this team could go in the future.
Yeah, I mean, there's no question. I think there were 2 stories at Media Day that made a lot of sense to me. One was Chet. Whatever the Chet story you wanted to do, there were any number of options. The other was Micic, because those are the 2. Chet is less of a mystery. We saw Chet at Gonzaga. Many of us saw Chet play USA basketball against a guy named Victor Wembanyama, who we're going to talk about here in just a minute, I promise. But we've seen Chet in a couple of summer leagues. So we've seen quite a bit of Chet. The question is, what's it look like when you put Chet with Shea Gilgeous-Alexander? He was asked that question today, and he said exciting, which was basically the only word he gave to describe that situation, the pairing of the 2 of them. Micic is a genuine mystery man. Not that it's not like the jury's out on whether he can play. He's one of the great EuroLeague players. But you're probably not watching a ton of EuroLeague unless you're a psychopath like some of us are. Which, by the way, before I ask you to talk about that, it's a great segue. I think it was Joe Masato today asked Mark Daigneault, did you get to watch Shea and Giddey? Did you watch those guys in the World Cup? And Mark said, not live, I can tell you that much. So he was not. Was not watching at the odd hours they were playing. He actually got an edit put together for him so he could watch that way. And also he said didn't get great internet on the beach, so not a lot of watching those clips even in the moment.
Nice. Nice. Good for him, by the way. Good for him.
Yes. Some basketball people can't get away from basketball, and I think it's pretty clear he can't. Basically what he said is, if the kids are down, we're down. So we're not watching basketball at all hours because if that's when we sleep. So
absolutely.
But on the point of Micic, I thought he was pretty. He's one question I always have when those guys arrive. He's quite fluent in English. His English it's not his first language, but he's really good at it. He's very conversant. I had met him before, so I had already kind of made a little bit of a first impression. But what was yours when he was sitting in there with us?
Yeah, it's you had pointed this out on a pod we did afterwards. Like the first question is asked, and before he answers, he was like, "By the way, hello everyone."
Yes, yeah.
And maybe this is I don't know if that was this is a new environment. This I want to make sure and get off on the right foot. I don't know if this is a European thing, but it was appreciated, by the way. And yeah, he was. He was solid is a word that comes to mind. He was not fazed by anything that was asked of him. And it's not like he was super grilled by anything. But, even when he was asked about when his rights were held by Philadelphia, and he said that he'd never negotiated with them. When he talked about, expectations for the team, and he sounds like he's at peace for whatever the role that he's going to have, that he's not coming in expecting to be in the photo with 4 other starters that they have at media day, and so again it's everything is kind of pretty straightforward, I would say, for that. Obviously, like you say, we don't have a great read on how his game will translate to the NBA level. He even admitted that he expects the NBA game to be more physical, and that'll be something that's obviously going to be adjustment for him as well, and that he'll try to find ways that he can contribute. But it's not always a successful transition from Euro basketball to NBA basketball. And I mean, we've seen it the other direction in the World Cup, where we saw NBA players struggle playing, European style basketball. It can be very different styles.
Yeah, absolutely. That was another thing Mark talked about today. What he did watch, the differences in the way people guarded Shea, more ball pressure up the floor, more double teaming, which the Thunder started to see last year, but as Mark pointed out, saw less of than what he saw over there. So that stuff was really interesting. Mitic had a great moment to me. I asked him about getting hazed essentially as a rookie, and he said, "I think they will not do this with me in terms of carrying bags and all that stuff." He's a grown man. He's a man. He's 29, and a fun story about his jersey number, which you had asked him about.
Yeah. I was curious because, I mean, this is stuff that I monitor. I'm always fascinated by, what numbers that players wear, because and I'm the stories as well. There's a lot of stories that are written about players and why this number became there. Sometimes it was the number that was available. Sometimes it's something that's very personal. And so I had an inkling what the answer was going to be with Mitic, because overseas, go pull up any picture of him playing overseas, he's wearing number 22, but he's wearing number 29 in Oklahoma City. So I asked him about it, and so he explained that 22 is his favorite number, but Cason Wallace had been drafted. Cason Wallace got the number and had it before Mitic signed his contract, so he took number 29 because of his age, which I expected. But yeah, he didn't come in demanding number 22. He was like, okay, I'll take this other number instead.
Yeah. I think that's a fair point. I think it's a notable point that he was not trying to make a big deal out of that he didn't come in and offer Cason Wallace money. I mean, maybe he did offer, I don't know, but it didn't. He didn't convey that in the story. Let's say that. That's certainly for sure. I feel like it's funny. We've done a couple of podcasts now and talked about Media Day. We haven't talked much about Shea, because Shea is who he is, and at a media day like that, not a lot of. I talked about this in the open. I wrote about this. We've both talked about it. They weren't very bold in terms of saying, this is the year that we make a big move. They didn't talk about that sort of stuff. And Shea is the kind of guy who you'd want to be saying that kind of stuff if somebody was going to say it, right? He's the face of the team. He's the face of the franchise. So if one guy was going to come out and talk that way, I think it would be him. And he just didn't do it. And I think if he had, it would have been a much better story. But the fact that he didn't is not a story.
That goes back to my initial thought of this team being centered, not feeling themselves way too much right now, and understanding that last season they beat expectations, but I mean, it's like we're constantly reminded, they weren't 500 last year, which is a good message to get across to the team. Like, you still have a lot of work to do. And, we also, I think fans and media sort of have ideas in mind. Shea needs to take more threes. He needs to start taking 5 or 6 threes a game. Was that 40% 3-point shooting a few years ago? Was that real? And, he was even asked about that, but it just comes down to he's going to take the shot that the defense gives him that makes the most sense in the moment, not necessarily going to come down and start positioning himself purely to get a 3-point shot off. If that comes as a result of what has been created, that's fine. But yeah, just a much different way of sort of looking at this than those of us that are, just looking at raw stats and deciding how these need to be distributed.
I respect that answer, and I also always hate when players say, I'm going to take what the defense gives me, because like when you're one of the best players in the league, you dictate what the defense does in a lot of ways. So, you're going to get the shot you want to get in a lot of circumstances. Before we go, Ham, I do want to talk about, look, preseason is preseason, and I'm excited about it because it's basketball, and I love basketball, and I'm ready to watch players play, and I'm ready to start to get whatever hint we get of rotations. Spoiler, not much to start off with. We won't find out a lot about that Monday. But a lot of times you have to go into a preseason game and say, okay, what is the reason for you to care about this particular preseason game? That is not hard on Monday if everybody who can play plays.
Yes. If we get the Chet Wemby matchup that we have been waiting for, that will become like an actual important thing at important times during the regular season. But sure, if we could get a sneak peek of this, if we could just get like the teaser, there's a blockbuster movie coming out later this year. We just want to see the teaser right now. The teaser never disappoints, right? I've never seen a bad movie trailer. So just give me a little bit of that. Just give me something to show me what it might look like when we get down the road, and I'll be happy.
That's what I want them to start, obviously. I want both guys to start, and then I don't care. They can play 6 minutes. And the Spurs to be like, that's all we're getting out of Wemby tonight. I'd be fine with that. I would like to see them guard each other on a couple of possessions. I'd like to see them guard each other at a couple of different spots on the floor. And if that happens in 3 possessions, cool. It is a preseason opener. I could not have lower expectations for the first NBA preseason game. You're not going to get a ton of minutes out of starters. You're not going to get a whole lot of rotational hints. You're not going to get any of that stuff. But if you can give me 3 plays of Chet, Vic, give me.
And by the way, rotation, what is that exactly to Mark Daigneault? I mean, that is an ever-evolving, completely...
We're not going to get hints. That's right. We won't get hints the game before the All-Star break. We don't know. Yeah. It's going to change all the time. And it's philosophically a thing he wants to do to kind of keep guys on their toes, and that's very true. Now we might get, the preseason can give us a hint at the starting 5 if he starts the same lineup every game in the preseason. We can reasonably think that is going to be the core starting 5. He may tweak it because he's want to do that with different matchups and stuff like that. But yeah, you're right. We're not. That's why we can't even set our expectations there. That's why your best bet, especially on Monday night, is like the thing you really hope for Monday is like just look. I know what most of you are hoping for right now is that OU beats Texas. But after that, your next hope should just be that they both play. Nothing we've heard from the Thunder indicates that Chet won't. I mean, I think every expectation is that, barring anything happening between now and then, he would play. I don't have a great sense for how the Spurs are going to use Wembanyama in the preseason. I just haven't been there, and I don't know. But that's where all my karma's going right now. It's like my alma mater's also playing Georgia. I'd like them to win a football game too. But what I really want Chet and Wembanyama to both play. I want them to both start, and I want to see what we see, whatever it is. We can't draw anything from it, but it doesn't mean we won't try.
Yeah, that'll be good. Seeing Vasa getting a few minutes at least to at least introduce us to a couple of things he can do, just to make sure. Again, this has been a few years in the making with him, just with Oklahoma City, to say nothing of his NBA career. So, for a while, it seemed like that OKC was merely just his negotiating tactic to get a better deal overseas, but now he's actually like a real basketball player. So to actually see him get game minutes, wearing a Thunder jersey will be, again, the stakes are 0. They're below 0, but just at least get him out there and get him acclimated to the NBA physicality that he's concerned about.
Yep. One of the things guys talked about when they talked about Chet was, and I think you used this word earlier too, he unlocks some things. There's some different lineups, but with or without Chet, they have some interesting things they can do. They can put out a lineup of some pretty interesting shooters if they want to, because you can kind of get Micic out there on the floor at the same time as, say, Bertans and Isaiah Joe, because you could have Micic kind of run the point and do some stuff there. They've got some longer lineups. They've got, again, as you would expect with this team, they've got some interesting small ball lineups. I don't know how much we'll see in the first game because we're probably going to see, we're probably going to see more Case and Wallace or Keontae Johnson than we're going to see later in preseason. Most likely, that tends to happen. So who knows what we'll get? But I'm interested in some of the combinations he could roll out there.
I want to see weird things. I want to see Chet, Poku, and Ousmane Dieng. Of course, we won't see Poku until the regular season, right. I suppose. But right. You have these three guys that are 7-footers basically that could play the three front court positions. I mean, there's a lot of possibilities there, and it's exciting to finally see it start to unravel because we've spent a few months hypothesizing, and now it's time to actually see some lab results.
This is the thing. We've talked a lot about college football today. This is what I love about the NBA. It's not a month of camp. Camp is a few weeks, but you play games while it's happening. So you don't have to wait long. Preseason games it's funny because the best players will play a little more, but the returns are a little diminishing because at a certain point you just think, oh my, get it over with. I want a real game. I want them to get to Chicago. I want a game that's going to matter in the standings. But you get to, for people like us who write about this and talk about this, you want things to happen and you can't see practice. So the fact that we get something we get to see, something tangible, it's coming as soon as Monday. I am super excited about it. I'm always ready for the start. The preseason is a little bit like media day where I'm so excited to get there. And then at the end, you're kind of like, okay, let's move on. I'm ready to go.
Yes.
But the beginning is so exciting. And Monday, because of who it could be, I cannot wait. I'm super pumped up for it.
Yeah, after 2 weeks is when we're debating, do we really need 5 preseason games? Can't we just get by with 2 or 3 at the most? And, sometimes the Thunder have done that. I think they played 6 last season. And at the end of 6, it's like, okay, yep, I think we're good. Let's get this ball rolling. But yeah, again,
Yeah, sometimes you used to play 8. You'd go to all those college, you go go to your best player's college campus and play all that kind of stuff. I do not miss that.
Yeah.
I do not miss the 7 or 8 game preseasons.
Yeah, it was unnecessary, but it was also business reasons. But yeah, obviously football has got people occupied right now, especially OU Texas, but OSU as well. But yeah, I mean the Thunder is it's right around, the real stuff is right around the corner. The teaser is going to be here in a matter of days.
Yep. I will be glued to OU Texas. Right now, the Thunder are not scheduled to practice, so I get to be in front of the TV watching the game. Thought about making the trip down there. Anybody wants to drive me down and back, holler at me. We'll talk. But I think I'll probably just sit down on the couch with the dog and watch it that way. Hamm, appreciate you being here. You can check out all of Jon Hamm's stuff on his website, jonhamm.com. Or is it jonhamm.com? I don't want to give the actor's website.
It's jonhamsports.com because, yes, that other guy exists and occupies he crowds my space a little bit.
Yeah. I should have checked before I started saying that. Check out jonhamsports.com. If this is your first time hearing or watching the show, please be sure to subscribe on YouTube or Apple Podcasts, Spotify, your favorite podcast app. And if you like what you hear, go ahead and leave us a review. We'll be back next week. We'll have real stuff to talk about. We'll see you then.